Good afternoon. My name is Michael Hanley. I am course director at Full Sail. I am joined by course director Elizabeth Roney, and we are going to be talking a little bit about location. We're going to be talking about some specifics about location. We're going to be talking about what students should be thinking about. We're also going to be addressing some what I like to call infrequently asked questions. Questions we would like the students to ask, but they seem to never do. And we're also going to be talking about the idea that it is always better to ask for permission, than forgiveness, especially when you're trying to be bailed out of jail. Not kidding, there have been students that have had that happen to. So to make sure you are safe with your locations and everything's going on, I have asked Professor Roney to come in and talk to us about this. So.
And it's also questions where we're going to be covering that you might not even think about, like, oh my goodness, I have a crew member that needs to use the restroom, and I picked a location that's in the middle of a park.
They never think about the restroom. Thank you. Number one, your crew must have access to the ability to release bodily functions. Yes.
And eat.
Feed your crew. Always have a place to be able to feed your crew.
Mm-hmm. Just little things that you might not think about because you take it for granted, until you're out there on location and you think, oh my goodness.
Well, that's the trick. They should not be out on location thinking, oh my goodness. So what are a student has written a script, okay? And they have thought it through to where they think they have the proper location, they can do this, they know they can shoot, but they still have to go and ask questions of the person. So what are some of your tips for actually going out and scouting or finding a location?
Well, let me back up just a quick moment. Because the courses here at Full Sail are so fast-paced, in terms of coming up with a topic and your locations, you almost have to do that simultaneously. I would not recommend coming up with an awesome topic and then later figuring out where you're going to actually shoot. I would almost recommend doing it together at the same time.
So your idea is write to a location they can go to rather than write the script and do the location.
Yes, because oftentimes I have students, or I see students who have this brilliantly complicated, awesome idea that if they could pull it off would be spectacular in their 3 to 5 to 8 minute time frame that you have. But then they start researching and art design location shooting, and then realize that they don't have the permission to film there.
Right.
That they can't get the okays. And they're like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? Because this is the location I want. This is the only location I can use. What am I going to do now?
Okay, and one thing to point out that I do want to address there, she just said a different thing about different minutes. Each class has a different requirement for the scripts. Script writing technique currently at the time of this recording has a 5 to 7 page script. Fundamentals Production 1 has a 2 to 3 page script. For what you're teaching, you're doing a mini documentary. What is the requirements on the time limit for that?
The average is about 5 minutes.
About 5 minutes. So you can usually figure that the average is going to be between 3 and 5 minutes that you're doing. So when you're writing a narrative script that is going to be used for most of the time you're looking for a location for that kind of story, always plan for the idea of 3 to 5 minutes, so 3 to 5 pages. So you've got to really keep your locations tight. This is, again, why we say write to a location you know and you have access to. I say it in my class, don't write in that you're going to use a restaurant or a convenience store or something like that unless you know the owner of the restaurant.
Yes.
But we have had students that have gone to restaurants and been able to do stuff because they've talked ahead of time on that one. So I just thought it was important to address the idea of the fact that they're only going to have so much space to be able to do the filming.
Yeah, I mean, in my class, like when you get to portfolio 4, those classes, you pick your topic during week 4 of location lighting, then you're thrown into art design location shooting where you're starting to research by week 2. So you have very little time to narrow down your locations and really solidify your topic. But to get back to your question of how to find locations, is that what you asked?
So what are the first steps that someone should be doing? Let's say they followed our advice and they've written the script, they already kind of know what they want to do, or since you're saying about the idea that they should write the script to a location they can use, it almost sounds like they need to do the location scouting before they even write the script. What do you think about that?
The trick is to stay logical and to stay realistic. Topics involving medicine, and that would involve a medical facility or a military base, sound great, but they can also be very difficult to get the okays to film there.
They can be almost impossible. A number of professional productions with money and with time have been denied access to medical facilities because of the nature of privacy, but also the nature of what you can and cannot control in the background. So again, that realism is, we have to think about the idea of a student is a low budget film. Our students are sitting here, basically, when they get to your class, they're finding for a mini doc, so they're finding a location. In Portfolio 2, they have 1 week to write a 2 to 3 page script or to edit a 5 to 7 page script that they did. So they've already kind of got it in their head a little bit where they want to shoot. What are we saying? Are we saying that a student looking at a script might have to stop and go, this script doesn't work right now for what I can get?
It's very possible.
Okay.
I've had to break that news to several students during week 2 of my class when they're like, I just cannot, no one is signing off, no one is agreeing for me to come here. At that point, your options are either, well, you need to find an actual location that can mimic your scripted location, that you can alter to look like what you want, or you have to scrap your idea and come up with something completely different.
Right, and that's one of the keys when it comes to some of the stuff with what the different projects are that we're doing. Projects are going to be narrative where you have control of the script, but there's also going to be projects where you're going to have to go out and you're going to have to do a mini documentary where you're going to be interviewing people, getting B-roll. You're going to, at a certain point, also have to find a client for a commercial on this one. So every project is going to be unique, but everything that we're talking about is something that every professional winds up encountering in the industry for no matter what they do, no matter what's going on with anything.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's say I'm the student, I wrote the 5 to 7 page script, and I'm sitting here going, okay, I think I can do the location. I think I can do this. Now that we've really kind of made it to where it's like, don't have helicopters flying over a building. I've had that script also. That they're being practical. Knocking on the door.
What's the next step?
What's next?
Well, again, think logically and think realistically. Think about locations that you can easily get to, and you're pretty sure that you can get the okay to go in the front door of. Now, that's saying I wouldn't recommend staying to your own home. Now, that right there is another can of worms, because whether you own your home or are renting your home, the rules change a little bit depending on the permissions to use that location.
And it depends on the class and what the rules are for some of that stuff, yeah.
Yes, but you need to find your locations. I would highly recommend picking a location that you can walk to, that you can drive to, that you can get on the bus and easily go to.
With your equipment.
With your equipment.
But for like a narrative class that also your actors can get to as well, and any potential crew that you get. Just because you can easily get to this location, you don't know that your friend who lives on the other side of town can easily get to your location.
Yeah,
So-
and no matter what location it is, you always need to go there at different times during the day to see how the location changes based off of foot traffic and noise, especially if it's an outside location like a park or a sidewalk or the outside of a restaurant or even the inside of a restaurant. You should know when it's going to be the loudest, when it's going to be the quietest. If it's outside, you need to pay attention to the sun. Where's the sun going to be? So you need to spend a long time. I tell my students at least an hour, dedicate yourself to each location. Just sit, walk around, see how things are.
but I've got a nice little horror story on one that goes into that one. We had a student that wrote out a script that was very easy. It was around their neighborhood. They got permission from their neighbors to be able to shoot in their yards. They had verified with us that the city had particular permitting to where they fit within the rules on the sidewalk. They scouted everything out, and it was a nice, simple story about a missing dog. And in the script, it has, because this is the location they had, they said they go towards the pedestrian walking bridge. Okay, great. Can you get permission? Yes. We've gone through the website. Yes. They didn't know that on the day they were shooting, the city was going to be doing repair work on the bridge. But it was listed in the city's website because it was going to be closed. They discovered that late. So when they went to the location, there's all these trucks and everything around, and they had to scramble to try and figure out what else to do. So anytime you're in public area, double check on that as well on there.
Oh, yes. And I also, when it comes to, you can't just assume that because it's public, then that means you have the right to go in there and start filming. Even Central Park in New York, you have to ask permission to go in there and start filming.
You have to ask permission in any park. Town parks have rules, that kind of stuff. In fact, think about it. Here, I got a perfect example. As a parent, you've rented out one of those bungalows for birthday parties, right?
It's called a pavilion, not a bungalow.
Pavilion. Thank you. Thank you.
It's not that fancy.
Okay. Yes, I have been corrected. Thank you. Okay, but
How did I
you
do
signed
that?
up with it. No, you signed up with it. So if a student doesn't ask for permission and they go there and try and shoot, all of a sudden they've got the happy birthday party in the background. Is their shoot completely messed up now?
It is, because I can go to them and say, look, I paid $67 to have this block of land for 4 hours. It is mine. You don't,
And notice block of land. These parks do parse out on that one. So yeah, no place is public on there. There will always be somebody in control. Okay, so yeah, go around. Okay, so go around looking at your place, looking at your area, research, on my end, research the location.
Yes.
In my class, basically because of the narrative, I can express a little bit of the horror story sometimes based on this. So everything I'm telling you about has happened at some point in a production class because a student didn't follow some of these rules. Again, thank you for coming in for this because this is great. So, okay, let's continue on with it. So they're walked around, they've looked around and everything, then what?
It's important to note, again, where the sun is, so you know when to come out and shoot, what kind of equipment you will need. Will you need to bring a key light, a fill light, a reflector with you? Even if you're filming outside, you should not purely rely on the power of the sun. You should have at least some kind of fill, which you could use as a reflector. So then comes the question of, are you going to be alone? Are you going to have crew? How are you going to do the camera and the reflector? And before I forget, not all places allow you to bring film equipment, which means sometimes you might have to use a handhold, or to get around that no film equipment, you can use a monopod instead of a tripod.
Depending on where the location is.
Depending on the location,
Right.
yes.
There is a area around where, sorry, I'm making an edit. There is an area around where Full Sail is that has one community that's very open and basically says you can use a tripod as long as you are only a crew of 3, including the actor. So it's great for one of these mini docs, one of these things there, because in fact, I've even done it where I've been the person talking about talking about a business, and there was just 2 people crew-wise. We were great. It was on a city street. Literally, if I had crossed over a block to the next town,
The rules
I
would
would have
change.
the rules changed, and I would have had to pay $500 just to get the permit to shoot there, let alone anything else. So you really do have to check that kind of thing
And
there.
filming
so, yeah.
on streets is very tricky. You definitely need to make sure you contact the correct people, because when you're filming on the street next to traffic, you could be a distraction to drivers, which is a safety aspect, especially if you are holding large equipment or signs. You catch the driver's eyes. So as you said, you need to know you can have 1 tripod, 1 camera, film crew of 3 or less.
Right.
that
So
small.
what we're really winding up getting into is the idea of location scouting. And this is the information, because a lot of people think location scouting is just doing that. You'll notice that we led with the question of what is the first thing to do. And I said, knocking on the door. You can't even knock on the door yet. We haven't gotten there yet because our location instructor here is basically giving us an entire list of everything we must have done beforehand.
20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, the way you did it was you got in your car and you drove around, or you used your feet and you walked and you found your location. Because these marvelous things, such as smartphones and even new technology like the internet and Google Earth, you could not access it back then.
I want to point out something. Note we're saying Google Earth, not Google Maps. Google Earth actually lets you look at the area. It lets you go in. It lets you almost walk around. Maps does not do that for you. It can show you how to get there, but Google Earth is a very powerful app.
Well, Google Maps, you can use the street view.
On the phone, but it's very limited. We're talking a lot of our, on the computer, a lot of our students are using mobile apps. So the mobile apps are limited on some of the things you do because it's not assuming on a mobile app that you'd be looking to see a location.
Yeah. Well, nowadays, so if you have the ability to use technology, use it. Don't, do what Michael and I had to do, which was use our feet and walk around, knock on doors, drive around.
Well, you still have to knock on doors
Still
and
have to
drive
knock on
around.
doors.
But
I mean, that's how they found
the pre-location, yeah.
That's how the location scout found that beautiful home for Godfather. He went up and he knocked on their door.
Yeah.
Said, I would like to use your house.
They can say no.
And actually, the first time, I believe it was the wife said no, and then the husband's like, wait. She means yes.
How much are you paying us to use our house? Exactly. But be aware, the more you're in a film-centric community, the more people are aware that film people pay money, but also a lot of people treat students the same way they treat regular filmmakers, depending on your community, because our students are spread all over the place.
All over the world, yeah.
Yeah, and we do actually have some in areas that are very film-friendly, but friendly at a cost. Okay, so they've got Google Earth, they've got the apps. Now what's next?
Next for me comes the common sense questions of, okay, I love this location. This would be perfect for my script. Then the common sense of, all right, well, are there restrooms that I can use?
Yes,
Is
we're getting
there
back to the
easy
restrooms,
access
yes.
to food? And I say that a lot for students who want to film in parks or even in a restaurant. You can't assume that
They're going to give you food.
that they're going to give you food. I mean, obviously they're not going to comp you in any way, but I mean, you could sit down and you could eat there. But just because you're filming in a restaurant might not mean that their restrooms are open to the public, which would include you. It would usually only be open for paying customers.
Right.
And would you be included in that? And then comes the question of permitting. Can you legally film here? And do you need a permit to do so? Not every place will require permit and insurance, but some places will. And unfortunately, for online programs here at Full Sail, the responsibility of the insurance does fall on the student.
Yes, and that's the one key thing is we do give hold harmlesses forms for the students to fill out that are both covering the university and the student, but this does not mean that it covers insurance. And this is a reality of low budget filmmaking and working as an independent. You have to look at yourself as an independent filmmaker that is making use of the resources you have at hand. The reality of life is that you have to go out and look for creativity more than look for more money, because you're not going to find it easily when you're first starting out.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, the average college student cannot and probably should not drop $500-600 just on a 5-minute mini doc for a class, and we aren't expecting you to. But the reality is if these are the locations and you will not compromise, then that is your responsibility to get the insurance for and then cover.
And this is one of the things I've noticed on here, and yes, I'm going to have a moment here to where I'm going to have to adjust my chair, so yeah.
Should I adjust mine too?
No. we're doing this live to tape. Basically, one of the things that I've noticed is students have this tendency of thinking, but if I'm going to be this professional filmmaker, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do all this other stuff on there. And basically, just to reiterate it, you're saying basically work to their resources, that kind of
Right
thing?
now, this is your time to learn. This is your time to make mistakes. My daughter loves Magic School Bus. So to quote Miss Frizzle, take chances, get messy, make mistakes. This is your time to do it before you graduate and start working on a feature film and realize that, oh my goodness, I just made a complete error and now I've lost this client. This is the time to think about a topic and then backtrack and then find out, oh, that didn't work, now I need to do this, and then learn. And then the next portfolio group that you get into, you
But
will
they're
learn from your
learning
past
following the
mistakes.
rules and the content.
Yes.
Okay, so each production has its own rules, its own content, its own thing doing. What about, for everything we're talking about here so far, for these locations and everything, there is going to be one factor that's going to come into play for all of this so far. Do you think for everything we've talked about so far, by a person saying, I'm a student versus I'm making a short film, do you think that makes a difference when it comes to any of this stuff?
It will, in terms of some locations giving you the okay. Some locations will be more lenient with you if they hear that you're a student. Also, some places might waive the permit fee or at least give you a decreased permit rate, insurance rate, if you are a student. But with students also comes the assumption of, well, you're not a professional yet, at least in the terms of you're still learning. I wouldn't use it as a crutch, but it is something that I would definitely use.
At a certain point, they do have to identify themselves as a student, but it really doesn't make a difference one way or the other.
No.
Really, you still have to be, you still have to treat yourself as a professional, so you might as well act like it. The reason I'm asking this is a lot of students have this attitude that they're only now making stuff that is for their class. But with this being a online class, with this being a production-oriented class, they can go out and actually do their own productions.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Professor Baker basically says you should be shooting as often as possible.
Yes.
On here, on this one. So a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is aimed at the idea that not only are we talking about class, but we're talking about what you should be doing as a professional.
Yes, and use what you're learning and what you create in your classes in your own portfolio to then show potential clients.
So I'm loving the fact, and I'm not that I'm trying to circle it back, but I'm loving the fact we still haven't reached knocking on the door.
I know.
No,
you haven't.
but that's important because everything we've been talking about is stuff that you technically need to do before you do the, can we use your house? Your wife said no, but would you say yes?
Yeah. Before you actually go and knock on the doors and start filming, you need to know if you can even legally be there in the first place. One great starting point is your local film commission office. Now, not all film commission offices are created equal. I have had students in some places who don't even have a film commission office in their area. Some places take forever to get back to them. Other places are perfect, on the ball, answer any questions you have. So do bear that in mind. If you do plan to film outside, especially in a park, I always tell students to contact your local Parks and Recreation office or your county.
Yeah, anything that's like that, park, that kind of stuff. A student just told me about the fact that they're doing a 3-minute short actually at Devil's Tower on there. And they had to get separate permissions for every place they're in, and the state park is completely different, but they were told by the film commission, oh yeah, the state park actually is pretty good as long as you go in there. So you have to network. But I want to add in that I think one of the things the students, when they don't find a film commission locally, they think, oh, well, there's no film commission. You have to look either city, county, or state. I had a student that contacted me and said, we don't have a film commission, I don't know about permitting. And I said, where do you live? And they told me where. And I looked at the city, couldn't find anything. Looked at the county, couldn't find anything. Then typed in filming in Indiana, film Indiana, and it had every single thing. It's the research is what
Yes.
we're coming down to in a lot of this. Okay, so so now I'm going to play student. I'm sitting here. Okay, you've told me everything. Now asking it again. When can I knock on the door?
Are you sure you can go there legally?
Yes. I'm
Okay.
sure. I've checked the permits. It said that if you're shooting on private property, it is the owner of the property that gives permission. It says if you're on city streets, you must get this permit. I have researched everything. I know the location I want. I can actually shoot here if I do X, Y, and Z. I just now need to get permission from the person that owns the location.
You've done the film
Done
application,
done the
permit
application, or I have downloaded and can present proof to whoever is there that these are the rules for it. Because a lot of places just say it's okay, just go to our website. I've run into that. So so we've done the
now-
due diligence.
Now you may go.
Okay, so what should I do? I knock on the door. What's the first thing I should be saying? You are now my location manager. What's the first thing you're going to say to somebody when you knock on the door?
Well, for these projects specifically,
Yes.
Full Sail students, most students pick topics that they are familiar with people that they are familiar with. So in your case, most of these probably will not be cold calling knocks.
Okay.
You will already have an established relationship with the person. However, that is not always the case. So you should introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Roney, and I'm a student at Full Sail University. I am in this course. This is what I'm supposed to do, and I would like to know if I can have access to your location, or this is what I'm filming at, and
Okay.
how do I go about appeasing you and also getting what I want.
So that was a key piece of information there. You are identifying your name, what it is you do. So instead of being in production, you identify yourself as I am a student of this thing, which, you're not playing it as a crutch, but you're still identifying yourself as a student. You then are addressing the topic of the class. So basically what you're saying is one of the first things they should do is let them know this is an actual school assignment.
This is a school assignment. This is not going to be for commercial broadcast use. Because a lot of places will say no, 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 thank you. If you go up to them and say, hey, I want to bring a film crew in and film your place, they'll be like, no, no, I'm sorry, you're not going to do that. Because they're going to automatically assume this is going to be on TV, this is going to be on YouTube.
Well,
what am I going
our
to get in return?
Students are going to be posting a lot of stuff to YouTube and also using it for their demo reels. So you're running a fine balance is what
Yes,
you're basically
yes,
saying.
you are.
Okay, so identify your but that's the key thing. I really think that's a good one that I did not think about for our students is the fact identify the objective of the course. If you just go in and say, I'm a student at this place, I'm supposed to make a film, no, you're not getting the information. Think about the fact that if you walk up to somebody and you think about one of these competition shows where they're actually handicapped by the fact they can't tell somebody the whole thing that they're doing because that's part of the competition. That makes for good drama. In
It's not
real
reality.
life, in reality, you want to come in and present as much information as possible so they're aware of who you are on that one. So
Especially if it's someone you don't know, you want to get as much information as you can in the first few seconds before their brain shuts down and automatically say no.
okay.
It's like selling yourself. You're selling the idea. This is again to if someone who you don't know.
So I want to take a moment here, and we might pause for a second, go into a part two or whatever. I'm throwing this in for that one. You had a list of topics that you felt were the important things to discuss. I think basically we might want to go ahead and I think for here forward, we answered a lot of good questions. I would like to go ahead and let's address some of these things. So basically, if you would like to do it or if you'd like me to ask you questions off of it, this is your call.
No, this is a list of a few topics that I have posted in my class for kind of like a checklist for my students. And this is in no particular order, though honestly, I probably should put it in order of what you should do first,
Well,
importance.
it's really good. So I'm going to just say the floor is yours. Why don't you go ahead and address it directly then?
Okay, so the first thing you should do is you should take your time, which I have mentioned before. You need to spend time at your location. And to really take in your surroundings. If you're outside, pay attention to birds. Are you by an airport? Do you hear planes overhead? Anything that could really mess up with your audio. Car traffic, basic rush hour traffic, anything that would mess up your
Again,
your
this is
audio.
the time of day.
Time
that
of
you
day,
take-
also
yes.
time of year. For example, in Florida right now, we're in our rainy season, and you really do not want to be outside anytime after 2 p.m.
Yeah, that's true. And we thoroughly recommend weather apps on there. One of the great things that Professor Baker's doing is in CVD is he's actually having students research apps that they could use, and he's putting together a list. So probably by the time somebody's viewing this for our classes, they would have already started looking at some of these apps. So yes.
And it is best to visit your location at the same time of day that you actually plan on shooting after you've done all this research of spending time there. So you know the sun position and what you are getting yourself into when it comes to possible distractions. Next is composition, and I am strong about this in my course. You will need to make sure that your camera is level, especially if you're filming outdoors. You need to make sure you know how to adjust your tripod legs if it's not going to be a handheld camera. Make sure your white balance is correct, and really look through your viewfinder for perfect composition before you start filming. Make sure that there's no distracting objects in the way. And what are you holding up?
There are actually apps that will let you set and check level on your cameras. Use it. We have had this question before, so we've had that question about how do I make sure that the camera is level.
A lot of students might think, or a lot of people, even some professionals might think, oh, I don't have to worry about what's in the background because I can just get rid of it in post. That's what post is for. That's true. And
No, it's not true.
to an extent.
To a possibility.
And as a professional photographer, you might think, oh, I can get rid of that in Photoshop. You might be able to.
After Effects.
And After Effects. You might be able to, but it'd be so much easier if you took an extra second or two and paid attention before you start hitting the record button to what is actually in your surroundings, what is behind you, to make sure that all of that extra post work isn't
Okay. And this
going
is
to happen.
This is a key thing, is why one of the requirements is that you're doing photo storyboards, is we want you to actually possibly, if you can, go out and look at the framing of that location. You have to actually look at it with the eye of the camera on here. So this is still for location. We're talking about the idea, I'm looking at the level is, do you actually have level ground to shoot on? Would be my thing looking at the
Yeah.
level on there. What is your angle on there? So everything we're talking about that you think about with this one, we're talking you go out to this location as if you were shooting at this location.
This isn't on my list, but you just reminded me of it. Shooting in cars.
No.
No. Okay, well,
No.
when it comes to level ground, if you're not going to use a tripod, you need to have it in your hand. It needs to be steady. Like, can you hold the camera steady enough so it's not wiggling around? You could have a stabilizer. But when it comes to things that you might want to use, like in a car, no, don't do it, because it would require not only a safety issue, but you would have to mount the camera very sturdy,
Right.
and that,
And in a number of communities, it's considered distractive driving.
yes, and it's
If
illegal.
somebody's videotaping the driver, especially if they're talking, this is part of the reason why they do have rigs. But anytime you've ever seen anything in a car, anytime that it's moving, it's been permitted.
Yeah, it's either permitted, or they're
Permitted,
really
yeah.
not in the car moving.
Right. Yes. And you can record static. You can be moving, you can have the whole conversation in a car. You can do the whole thing like that. But a moving car is its own permit, because technically you're moving location. And if I was driving in that car from that 2 towns I mentioned, just by having the camera and shooting, going from one town to the other, I've changed permitting
Yeah,
rules.
you do. So let's just say right now, no filming in cars, no filming on train tracks.
No filming in moving cars. Oh, yeah.
No filming on moving cars, no filming on train tracks.
No filming on train tracks. We've heard horror stories.
But getting back to my list.
Yeah, getting back to the list, yes.
The
Well, that's
next
still
topic,
location.
the next topic I have is just convenience. You need to make sure you have access to a power source and restrooms, is what I have here, because you may just rely on the batteries in your camera, but when your batteries run out, how are you going to charge them?
But also, what are these things around that are kind of
Your
giving
lights.
us the image?
Yeah, are you going to have batteries
I
in
hate this
those?
chair.
Are you
Sorry.
going to have like is there an outlet? You need to think about these things before you come. Like, I had a student a few months ago who really, really wanted to film in an abandoned building, which is great, perfect. But he had no power source because it was an abandoned building. There was no electricity. There were no bathrooms. Well, bathrooms that had functioning water.
Mhm.
So just these little things that he didn't think about going into it because he was just super excited of this is going to be awesome. But then you get there and you think, oh, well, I don't have any power source for these lights. Where am I going to run this cable? Where am I going to use the bathroom? Where am I going to charge this? Where am I?
And remember something, these productions that are out there doing a lot of this stuff, they've got mobile facilities on there. That's what a lot of people don't think about. Even with sometimes low budget independent films, a lot of the budget is going towards these extra facilities, is going through being able to do the electricity, the thing. The generators for these things may be small, but they are soundproofed for them and are expensive to rent on there. But a lot of students start thinking, oh, I can just do this. And you can't use existing light, not for these cameras. You're not going to get a good image.
No.
So always keep that in mind, yeah, on there. Because that's one of the big things, power, electricity. Where are you getting from? I love the fact our bathroom keeps coming up a little
It's
bit.
important. It really is. My next topic is just because it is public land does not mean you can randomly go there to shoot whenever you want, which is what
we really covered
which we've
on the
really
thing,
covered
yeah.
before. Always make sure, and if you strike out with your film commission office, with the city, with the county, I always tell students, and if you can't contact the owner of the property itself, like if you want to shoot at a hotel, at a restaurant, at an inn, at a school, always contact your local sheriff's office. Because odds are, if you're somewhere where you're not supposed to be and someone calls the police on you, which it's happened before, it's happened to my husband
Okay.
before.
why the sheriff's office versus like the local police or
That's
state
what I mean,
police?
like a local,
The
lo-
local authority then.
the local
Okay.
law enforcement office.
Right, and so if you're thinking countywide, you're gonna be going to a couple different locations, then a sheriff be county,
yes.
but if you're just being one area,
Because
it'd be city.
they would know where you should and should not be.
Okay, go ahead and continue.
If you're shooting at your home, or if you're shooting at your friend's home, do you own your home? Do your friends own your home? There's a difference between owning your home and paying a mortgage, or paying a rent to someone else who owns the home.
I just have to back up just because something you said. She meant, do your friends own their home? You said, do your friends own your home?
Well, even that
Yeah,
too.
well, that can be possible
But-
also. Yeah,
but
if
who-
you're renting from a friend, do not assume that the friend is going to be very, on that one.
Do you have a roommate who is on the lease with you and says no, but you say yes?
I
That's
love-
also an issue.
I love one of the things that basically was taught to me in the master's degree. If you're going to rely on friends and family, prepare to lose them. Mm-hmm. Okay, so go ahead.
So always make sure you get permission from the owner or the representative of that location. Just because I personally rent my home right now, just because I rent my home and I'm paying a rent does not mean I have the right to bring in a crew. It might say in my lease that I am responsible for all damages, but there is a time that I should probably contact my the leasing agency and be
Right.
like, hey, just so you know.
What do you think about the reality of, let's go back to that husband and wife scenario. Let's just do a thing. The wife said no and the husband said yes on the house for the Godfather. What if the house wasn't in the husband's name?
That's also a good
Does
question.
he have the right to actually
Well, then
sign
that
the
goes
forms?
into a little domestic dispute there.
Well, if they get divorced and they say you did the damage to this house,
Yes.
they could stand a. So again, the owner of the property is the one you think, or we mentioned before about apartments, that kind of thing. The landlord is the one that is in charge of the
Yes.
location and makes those decisions on who has to be contacted.
Now,
Okay.
if it's a condominium,
Condominium,
thank
yes.
you, condominium, and you own that condominium within a big complex, you own it, but you still need to make it approval from the whole complex.
Right,
when it comes
homeowners
to
associations.
Homeowner association when it comes to especially noise
Right. Also, this would be the same thing for if you're in a particular property area. Especially if it's one of these enclosed ones, oh yeah, you're going through the homeowner association. Okay.
And the last one I have here is always have a backup location and a backup for your backup, because life happens. Sometimes people don't get back to you. Sometimes people say, yes, definitely, and then later say, no, I don't think so.
More times than you'd believe.
Yes. And always be prepared to hear the word no. You
I
might.
think I'm running out of video. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do the last one here.
Oh, I just did it.
Okay.
But basically, don't feel like this is daunting and you're setting yourself up for failure before you even started. These are just things to think about. And basically what it comes down to is be as realistic and logical and easy right now that you're in school as you can. These huge, grandiose ideas are wonderful and you should be doing them. But right now, for a very quick project in your class, it's only 4 weeks long, really think about what you can realistically pull off in that time frame.
Okay, and we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here on this one. Professor Roney, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming in here and speaking to me, and I think this is a wrap.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you, and y'all have a good afternoon.